Hey, thank you. This is Arthur Gasparo, Chairman of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. I'll call to order the October 10th meeting. We're meeting by Zoom, so please use care to speak clearly in a way that we can ensure accurate meeting minutes. Please speak through the chair. All votes taken at this meeting will be done by a roll call vote. Commissioners, we'll do a roll call right now. Commissioner Planzer,
Here.
Commissioner Buscarin,
Here.
Commissioner Marks,
Here.
and I believe we're waiting on Commissioner Topham. I don't see her.
She may not be present, Mr. Chair, tonight.
Thank you for letting me know. And with that, we will proceed. And the first item on the agenda is to review and approve the agenda. I would ask the commission's consent to move up after ratifying the minutes and warrants, the presentation on the PFAS investigation due to the change in meeting schedule to help accommodate our professional consultants that were here. So if nobody has concerns with that change, or are there any concerns with the agenda as published? Seeing none, we'll consider that approved by unanimous consent. And we need to accept the minutes of September 12th. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns with those minutes? Hearing none, we'll consider those accepted. We need to ratify the warrants of September 11th and September 25th. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And with that, I'll turn it over to Manager Carberg to introduce the PFAS investigation update, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Commission for your flexibility. For the PFAS update, I'm going to defer to Cameron Woods to introduce those items before we introduce the consultant presentation.
Sure, we have, hello everyone. We have a few updates that I'll share, being aware of time, because I know that our consultant has other commitments this evening. I'm going to give a quick status update on the latest round of home connections to town water. We have 11 that are scheduled to be connected at 16 Matacasham Valley Road, which I will from here on out refer to as MVR. The latest update is that the homeowner was contacted. We met with them, and the preference is for them to get a contractor for the work. So MJ is drafting up plans to depict the work that was discussed. At 30 MVR, we also met with the caretaker. A plan is being drafted at this moment to schedule a secondary meeting to get a quote for the work. The caretaker is coordinating and using their crew or other contractors, and that's their preference. At 44 MVR, there's no status update. At 48 MVR, we met with the caretaker after coordinating with homeowner, and the preference is for the caretaker to provide a quote to get the work done independently. At 25 MVR, we met with the homeowner on September 13th to follow up on a few questions, and the homeowner sent all of the quotes to MJ a week later on the 26th. MJ reviewed the quotes and told the homeowner that they are responsible and okay to move forward, and invoices will need to be shown in more detail. At 31 Monahans Road, it says that they're playing phone tag. So MJ owes the homeowner a follow-up phone call. At 39 Monahans, no update. 50 Oqua, no update. 84 Skyline, no update. And at 1 Webster Road, we are waiting on the homeowner to provide a signed pluming permit. Once that is provided, MJ will send back to the airport for a recommendation for payment. And finally, last but not least, 3 Webster Road, MJ sent an updated figure to the homeowner for approval, and the homeowner was unsure of how they wanted to proceed. So at that time, we're just waiting to hear back from them. And with that, I'll go ahead and introduce Weston Solutions to provide a PFAS investigation status report. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. I'm gonna, let me share my screen. All right, thank you, everyone. So I'm here just to provide an update on the most recent work that's been done regarding the PFAS investigation at the airport. So a quick overview. I'm going to discuss the EPA issuing their MCLs for PFAS, a summary of the most recent IRIS status report, the discussion of the Mass DEP, the Phase 2 audit and site inspection, a subsequent Phase 2 addendum report that was submitted, the updated disposal site boundary, some ongoing work, and then the current phase of the work, Phase 3, which is an evaluation of remedial alternatives. So as far as the EPA's issuing new MCLs for PFAS, that did happen on April 10th, 2024, as I'm sure everyone's aware. It did set maximum contaminant levels, or MCLs, for 6 PFAS compounds. This does, at this time, only apply to public drinking water supply systems, though Mass EPA is expected to adopt these EPA MCLs at some point. Regarding the IRIS status report, IRIS status report number 16 was submitted on August 30th. The fuel farm treatment system was sampled in February and May, and PFAS 6 were found to be non-detect in the mid and effluent samples. There was 1 round of residential sampling on MVR in May of 5 homes. All 5 homes were below the Mass DEP standard of 20 PPT. 2 of those homes did exceed the new EPA MCLs. And as Cameron was just discussing, there's 4 additional homes on MVR planned to be connected to the water line, and then 7 additional homes on the west side. And additional sampling is underway. Additional home residential well sampling is underway on the west side. And I'll discuss that further. So the Mass DEP Phase 2 audit and site inspection, so the Phase 2 comprehensive site assessment report was submitted to Mass DEP on March 8th. And subsequently, Mass DEP notified the LSP that they would be conducting an audit and site inspection to verify compliance with the MCP. The Mass DEP representatives did conduct a site inspection on May 2nd with the LSP and members of the airport team. And then Mass DEP issued a notice of audit letter to the airport on June 4th to provide formal certification of a Level 3 comprehensive audit of the Phase 2 report. And the airport and LSP are working with Mass DEP to facilitate the audit and respond to their questions. So following that, and with the questions that Mass DEP had, a subsequent Phase 2 report addendum was issued on June 28th in response to those questions. It provided supplemental information to assist Mass DEP with the audit, and it focused on 3 items: the disposal site boundary, an updated imminent hazard evaluation, and an expanded discussion of sources. The disposal site boundary was adjusted to include airport gas and downgrading areas west of the airport, and this was based on a PFAS signature analysis and what we know of groundwater flow in the area. The imminent hazard threshold had decreased from 200 PPT to 90 PPT, so we did reevaluate samples that had been collected, and we found no new risks there. And we provided additional discussion of AFFF application areas and their relationship to groundwater plumes, just some additional background that Mass DEP requested. So referring to the disposal site boundary, if you can see here, I hope you can see my cursor. So this red line is where this west side disposal site boundary was originally set as with the original Phase 2 site assessment report. And then with the Phase 2 addendum, the boundary was adjusted to where you see, so the green dotted line represents the disposal site boundary. Everything here to the north and to the south stayed the same, but you can see now the disposal site boundary does extend out to the west. And the way this determination was made is if you look at these color-coded pink and green dots on the homes, we compared the PFAS signatures based on sample results from some representative samples from the airport, and then there's an up gradient sample that was found from Mass DEP and UMass sampling up here on Pine Tree Road. And that's an upgradient source here. And so this has a different signature from the airport sample signature. So that's how we determined where this disposal site boundary would be for now. And so the pink ones are the pink dots represent a signature similar to the Pine Tree Road. Green dots represent a signature similar to the airport. And so as part of what when we reviewed this data, we looked at these sort of histograms of looking at, again, representative sample from the airport. And this is so along the bottom, those are the different samples, and the bars represent their relative concentrations. Same thing here for Pine Tree Road. And so we see a difference there, and that's how we use that to evaluate the samples and make that determination as far as the disposal site boundary. For ongoing work, again, as mentioned, we're connecting additional homes to the water line, and the airport is, and then we are currently in the middle of resampling homes on the west side that were either within this new disposal site boundary or directly abutting it. And these are homes that have not already been connected to the municipal water line. That's a total of 19 homes. 15 have been sampled so far, and we are working to get to sample the rest of those homes as well, and we're awaiting those results. We're also going to be installing 8 new groundwater monitoring wells in the residential areas on the west side. The main part being to confirm what we have determined so far as groundwater flow patterns. And then based on that new information, we will reevaluate the PFAS signature analysis and the disposal site boundary and the data from monitoring wells and residential well sampling to determine if any additional changes to be made. So this is our NCP timeline. We are currently in this phase right here, phase 3. The phase 3 report is due by March 3rd, 2025. And the phase 3 is required because some risks were identified in the phase 2 report. This report, as I said, is due March 3rd, 2025. And the phase 3 report is going to consider several things. One is connection of additional residents that have PFAS concentrations less than 20 ppt or the MCLs to the existing water line. Restoration of groundwater outside the non-potential drinking water source area. That's the area that covers most of the airport that is determined to not be used for drinking water, to 20 ppt or the MCLs as relevant. Potential for source area soils within the Zone 2 area on the airport property to leach to groundwater. And an evaluation of the airport geothermal system after we determined as part of the phase 2 report that was submitted in March 2024 that though the geothermal well system that exists at the airport is likely related to the westward expansion of the groundwater plume along Airport Road, though because it is right on the boundary, it's basically right at the edge of the Zone 2 wellhead protection area, there are no impacts to town wells expected. And then as part of this, potential remedial actions will be developed for these conditions and evaluated based on effectiveness and cost in accordance with MCP guidance. And that's all I have, and I will gladly take questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, Mr. Marks?
Yeah, as far as the geothermal wells at the airport, when you look at that, I'd like to see you evaluate whether to actually mitigate from that well sources. I know I brought this up once before, and somebody indicated it was expensive, but if we can mitigate the PFAS out of the well, it can actually be part of the recovery to, reduce the whole footprint of the PFAS. And I think that we should at least explore what the real costs of that are, because abandoning that and putting in a conventional heating system will come at an additional cost, which may be more, and then the cost of operating it. I just feel like we should look at that more of an entirety of not just, well, we can shut that off. Well, that's true, but we should maybe utilize it to reduce the PFAS in the ground as well.
Understood, and we can certainly continue to evaluate that. I know one of the issues with that system is because of the high flow rates in the system, and that typically any sort of treatment system like the one that is used, the GAC system that's used in the fuel farm, is reliant on sort of keeping keeping the flow rate to a certain level, which can really depend on the system, because the way it's treated is based on at least partly on residence time with the treatment media, in this instance, the GAC. And because the water is flowing through there so fast, I know that's part of the issue. I'm sure that's something we will continue to evaluate, though.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? So I'll just expand a couple questions. I think, given the news report today, as well as the statement that, you know, that your belief is that the geothermal wells are not impacting the town wells, are we able to build that out and provide greater level of assurance to the community of that position? I know you've done an awful lot of studies, and for you to say, you know, if you're making that statement, I believe that it's very likely, you know, true and founded. And I would like to, you know, I'm curious what kind of response or additional supporting information you might be able to provide to, I think, help assure the community that, you know, the geothermal wells, and in case, I think it's worth taking a couple of minutes on this. You know, it was somewhat buried in that article, but it doesn't introduce PFAS. It's more of that there is some moving around, which is also not to negate that concern, that that's happening. So how is it that if that occurs, that we're not likely to have, you know, and how sure are you that there's not an impact on any of the drinking water supplies for the residents of Nantucket? And then follow up to that is, how are we sampling that? Do you shut off the system and then you take static samples out of the drawer and the discharge wells themselves? Or is it that there are additional monitoring wells with grab samples in the immediate vicinity of those geothermal wells? And if there are not, and I know you've come up with an additional monitoring protocol, but now that there seems to be an additional focus on the geothermal, what I'm wondering is, you know, are additional monitoring wells in the vicinity of, probably more specific, the discharge injection wells, you know, are those needed, and what might your thoughts be on that?
Well, to answer your first question regarding the protection of the town wells, I think that in large part is going to be covered by by sampling those residential wells off to the west side. That sort of tells us, you know, because that is just based on the orientation of the zone 2 area and where the boundary is. Those can act as somewhat monitoring wells for that direction, and if we need to expand that as well, we can. But I think the additional sampling we're doing on the west side, I think, does work toward that. And then we can certainly evaluate doing additional sampling as well, either from other residential wells or from additional monitoring wells. That is part of the phase 3 evaluation. When we're looking at, part of that is going to be determining a monitoring well network for the entire site, not just for this. And so we'll take factors like that into consideration in order to make sure that we can see the full picture of all of anything in the groundwater. Regarding the sampling of the wells themselves, samples were collected. So essentially I wasn't there myself. I've only seen the picture, but it looks like the samples are collected. There's ports that are in the building where the water flows through, and essentially from the intake wells flows through the injection wells. There are sample ports sort of right at that nexus, and so that's where the samples were collected.
Thank you. So we are able to sample while there's expense related to the testing. It seems that we would be able to take those samples from the geothermal system, perhaps on a increased basis, if you will, or, you know, I just think that we should really be looking closely, sort of to Mr. Marks's, if we can't go or, it's logistically not possible, given that flow rate to, scrub that water, so to speak. I think that it would be important for us to understand, what the levels are within that water that we are essentially, I think on the draw, as it goes through the system, you would then know what you would be re-injecting and what is the sampling protocol that is currently proposed for that geothermal system. Is it just what's been done? Can we do a couple of more? What's on the board?
To date, we have only done the one set of samples from the geothermal wells, but that is something much like we do with the fuel farm GAC system, which we sample. We're currently sampling on roughly a quarterly basis, and that's certainly something we can start doing with the geothermal wells. If we want to see that information, that certainly wouldn't be a problem.
I think that would be helpful. I'm not trying to singularly give you directive at this meeting, but to give feedback and direction. If you could explore that and work with the manager and staff and Ms. Woods, I think that an increased sampling protocol for that system, given the recent information, would be positive. And I defer to the commissioners if they sort of have the same sense or any other comments. Anyone? Okay. Not hearing anything else on that point. When are the additional monitoring wells likely to be installed for the network on the west side of the airport?
Soon. We've been working on it. We've hit some trouble just in terms of, because the town is going to be redeveloping several of the roads over there next year. We're currently working with their contractor and to make sure that we're locating the wells in such a way that they don't get destroyed during road construction. So that's sort of, we had planned to have those wells in already, but so because of that, we've been working with them just to make sure that, because it's, unfortunately, I've encountered this myself before, if you put in a well before road construction, it can very easily get damaged, and we don't want to do that. We want to get these in and have them available for future use. So as soon as we can get that, we just got that information back from them. And so we're going to evaluate those locations now, see where we may need to adjust them. And as soon as we can get that all set, we're going to schedule the driller and hopefully within a couple of weeks be out there with the driller and get those wells in.
Great, thanks. And so all contracts are in place for that work to move forward as soon as your logistical details are worked out?
Yes.
Great, that's good news. And I understand, the coordination that's needed there, so I appreciate those efforts. Though I do think that it is important that we're able to get them in and continue we're at the sampling point, I think, at this stage, to really continue to collect the data as soon as we're able to. So thank you for that. Commissioners, any other questions regarding the PFAS update? I would take public comment should there be any questions. You could raise your hand, virtual hand, any attendees. Mr. Larson. Oh, I'm sorry. If I could first, I just saw the hands. Manager Carberg, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very, very briefly, I can advance that I have a brief item on the status of our geothermal sort of reconditioning or changing it over to conventional system. I will introduce that in the thermal optimization project. If you'd like, I could bring that up now.
Yes, please.
So we did task this item to McFarland Johnson. Rich Laston is here today. We had initially looked at, as Mr. Marks had suggested, can we treat in line? And because of the flow rates, that wasn't an optimal idea. Relocating the wells isn't an optimal idea either, because it is just shifting the plume elsewhere. The two options we've asked McFarland Johnson to consider are converting the geothermal system to a closed loop system and replacing it with a conventional system. McFarland Johnson is currently looking at that as part of the program definition report for the terminal project, which they'll deliver to both me and the OPM shortly, and we'll bring it to the commission in November.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Larson?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of comments, if I may. First, yes, the story in today's Inky was, I wasn't expecting that much coverage above the fold, but I did refer the reporter to contact the airport directly for any information pertaining to the geothermal system at the airport. Just so that information was clear. I was not trying to provide any information about the airport in any way. The second item I would like to make a comment is the depth at which these geothermal wells are re-injecting the water back into the ground. That is at a depth of, I believe, 150 feet, if I saw some previous information from earlier AirCom meetings. Is there going to be any sampling of the groundwater at that depth? There is a possibility, and again, I don't have the subsurface hydrogeology, but there are confining layers, between the upper and the aquifer that's at the 150-foot level. Just want to, suggest that maybe starting to sample and test, the water at those deeper levels would be helpful. Those are at the deeper levels of the state forest as well, so that we could have some assurances regarding, the water at that level, and if that plume is moving. I understand that most of the mapping and most of the profiling that I've seen, cross sections, have really looked at the top 50, maybe 60 feet. We're looking at something of an entirely different scale here. So I just wanted to suggest that we might want to, broaden the investigation to look at those deeper layers as well. And again, just to have the information to understand if there is a plume and how it's really moving, maybe perhaps at that deeper level. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Larson. As a follow-up to that, I guess, and Mr. Lasden or Mr. Kanarek, you don't have to answer this right now, but I just wonder, engineer brain, if you will, is it possible to open that well and take shut it down and take a static grab sample as suggested at that depth, or is it, logistically it just doesn't kind of work that way because there's a column of water through that well? Something to look at. I just don't know exactly how that might work or not work. My sense is that the sampling it through the system tells us what it is that we're drawing from that same depth. And I guess one of the questions would be, what is the depth at which the point is on the draw well, so that then we would know the concentration of any potential contaminants at that level. And we're getting, I think, into the weeds a little bit, but just to follow up on that, what kind of data, that I think gives you that information, unless somehow there's a pollutant source, like they say a Teflon tape or something that is in the network itself. You would know what is coming out at that point, and it kind of gives you that data. So I do think that whatever ability we have to take a little bit of a renewed focus on the levels that exist at those wells would be positive, and we should put a little bit more perhaps focus onto that. So that's just my thoughts on that. Ms. Molden?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, everyone. I'm Emily Molden with the Nantucket Land and Water Council. Thanks for the opportunity to speak and ask a few questions. First of all, as I'm sure many of you are aware, didn't really have the opportunity to attend your meetings through the summer, and it may be that you've already discussed some of these reports in the past. I do have a few questions that I'd love to ask, and I apologize if there's already been some discussion on these points, but I think some of them are very relevant to what was presented. So if it's appropriate, I guess I could ask one at a time, or if you prefer, you can just have me go through them all. But the first is actually in relation to the discussion around the geothermal wells and the additional bulge, if you will, in that western plume that seems to be attributed to them. I certainly appreciate and I'm interested in Mr. Mark's question and comment, and also appreciate hearing Noah's report on the investigation that's going on for alternatives to address that longer term. I think I had a question sort of similar to Mr. Larson's as far as whether or not the residential wells surrounding that are being proposed to be monitored are deep enough to really give us a sense of that level of the aquifer and what the contamination is and where that's moving. I understand from the presentation that there's a relative confidence that the public water wells will not be impacted by this, but it's something that is very concerning to us. And I think one of my questions was whether or not the Airport Commission has been in close contact with the town about this, specifically with the water company, the Water Commission, and whether you have been coordinating. I think that a coordinated effort to consider a longer term, more robust monitoring plan to make sure that we can confirm that that is not moving towards the public water wells is going to be really important. So I guess that's my first question, is whether there's been some coordination with the town on this issue.
I believe that there has, and that Mr. Larson and Manager Carberg have been working together, and I think that there's been some coordination of information as far as I know. Mr. Carberg, is there anything you'd like to share there?
No, I just add that we've been coordinating with Mark Willett at the water company as well.
Right.
Great. And I guess just as a follow-up, just so that I understand the process, is the sort of remediation or long-term monitoring, is that something that will be developed sort of in the next phase of this as this moves towards the remediation planning process?
That's
That was, yeah, thank you. That was my question also. And I think the answer that I had just heard was it's sort of part of phase 3. And Mr. Kanarek was jumping in. So go ahead, finish if you'd like.
I was just going to say, yes, exactly that. Like the phase 3, one of the main parts of that is reviewing the remedial alternatives, and then phases 4 and 5 are sort of more the implementation phases. So at this point, that's what we'll be doing, and certainly as I said, the geothermal wells will certainly be part of that evaluation. Great.
Okay, thank you. And then the second point in question was in relation to the identification and the I think it was the CSA addendum of the leasehold property to the north, as far as it also being a past source of PFAS, likely from the car wash activities there. And I know the Airport Commission will be aware of the fact that they recently received a special permit from the Planning Board to increase the number of car wash bays. And I don't know that this data or information was available at the time, but I was wondering whether the Airport Commission, as the property owner, would be reviewing that special permit again for the expansion and the stormwater, just to, and maybe if the consultants would be as well, just to sort of confirm that what has been proposed will eliminate any potential future PFAS source to the surrounding area.
Mr. Carberg?
So PFAS source, as much as it may be coming from there, was attributed, I believe, to the family of products known as the Simonized products. They were used in car washes, carpet cleaners, other activities. They were known to contain PFAS. From our discussions with Airport Gas is that they've switched product lines, a number of years ago, to items that, and I want to make sure I use the word carefully, whether it's contain no PFAS or contain no known fluorinated surfactants or are PFAS free. I can't speak to the extent to which they're certified as such, but it's a product from the soaps and the waxes, is my understanding, and that they also all have undertaken stormwater improvements, which we reviewed and permitted.
Okay, I guess maybe one request would be, and maybe this will already be part of the discussions around the remediation process, but whether there's a need or a potential for just monitoring that site as a potential source moving forward. Again, obviously, it's great to have that type of condition on a permit, but just to be able to reconfirm that there's not still PFAS originating from that as a source would be great. And then finally, I'm just interested, and maybe this is something you've spoken about recently already, but as far as the sampling that's taken place for some of the residents to the west of the airport, where the original samples indicated that the levels of contamination in their water were below the state and potentially the new EPA MCLs, which don't necessarily apply at this point. I just wanted to find out what type of ongoing or future sampling is proposed for those residents. And if none, I would certainly request that the Airport Commission and the airport consider additional monitoring for those residents. I think we all know that one sample is not necessarily enough to confirm what's happening in a system, particularly taking into account environmental factors. So we certainly would like to see a plan for ongoing additional sampling for those residents who may have initially shown to have safe water moving forward, because one sample's really not necessarily enough. So I'd love to just hear if there's been any planning for additional sampling for those residents.
If I may, I'll jump in. So that's already underway, and that's part of the sampling that Michael reported on earlier. He might be able to go into more of a technical background on number of samples that have been taken to date.
But the current work right now is there's essentially, if I may, so please clarify if my understanding is off, is that we are in the midst right now of sort of that, exactly to that point, second round of sampling of a good amount of the homes, the ones that are inside of the entire new revised boundary, as well as those that abut that boundary. And then from the results of this, we will determine either resampling, remediation or activity that may be needed, and or potential step out. And all of that will be informed based upon the data that is the collections that are underway. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ms. Moulton. Commissioners, any follow-up? Let's see any other hands. Staff or Mr. Kanarek. Okay, so we'll look forward to perhaps at our next meeting, hopefully hearing about the status of the samples, the monitoring wells, the further investigation into the geothermal system. I think that if we could get a little more detail to address Mr. Marks's question a little more formally, I think in terms of we get that there's a volume and that there's been sort of you looked at it a bit, but I think we really I think a little bit more information just to really be sure that we understand what, is it just a cost or is it just simply an engineering, and a magnitude type of a situation. And then that's back to further information on the studies that Mr. Carberg mentioned with the respect to the alternatives. So we'll have this, I think, on the agenda and hopefully a little bit of follow-up on all of those items. If anybody has anything else to add. Okay, thank you all. We'll keep working on this. And that'll take us back to our regular agenda. And Mr. Canarac, I think we're good, and we appreciate you being flexible to be here tonight with our change in meeting schedule.
No problem at all.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment for items that are not otherwise on the agenda? Hearing and seeing none. Mr. Carberg, pending leases and contracts, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go through all but one item, and I'll ask for consideration of one item separately. We have the airport manager search contract with ADK. You have already approved the scope, but there is an oversight where we included the assessment center unnecessarily in the original contract. So I think it's best for formality if you just approve the contract in this meeting, knowing this is a non-dollar change just to approve the contract. We have a $39,810 contract with Firematic. This is for the fluorine-free foam to replace AFFF in our ARC vehicles. We will use it both to stock the new truck that's under production now and rotate through our existing truck fleet to decontaminate those trucks and load them with the new product. That would take place later in this winter or spring with details to be determined. We have a $13,698 contract with the Shane Group for freight expenses for shipping our new Electro tug. We have a $19,610.90 contract with ADD Safegate. And this is to update the existing airport light control monitoring systems. It's the touch control light screen for the airfield monitoring. So it's the back-end programming for the grant eligible work. This will be reimbursed at the typical 95% split. We also have a change order for an additional $59,207.84. This is a change order submitted by Pearl, who is our employee housing contractor. This is the cost for National Grid's work to place the service and the transformer associated with that property. It seems a little bit high, but it's National Grid's work. It hasn't been marked up by Pearl at all. We reviewed it, so we will recommend approval on that. We also have related with that the grant of license for National Grid. This is the temporary approval that we give National Grid as the property owner for them to enter the property and place their equipment, the transformer and the service line on our property. The easement I have confirmed is on the draft ATM warrant schedule for town meeting. That would then give the permanent approval through that easement, which goes through town meeting. We have an amendment to CHA's scope of work. This is for $30,000 for the material testing and geotech work. We do need this work. It was not included in the original scope. Ted Gentry is here. He's done work to keep those costs low for us, so I recommend approval for that. We also have a larger ticket item. It's our construction administration service contract with McFarland Johnson. So it's their work as well as Griffin Architecture. We did not have this in place earlier, but it's to respond to submittals by the company, including the engineering work and the architectural services. I have one more item I would like to discuss, but I would like to batch this group separately for a recommended approval.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns on the contracts and amendments just reviewed by Mr. Carberg? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Back to you, Mr. Carberg.
So my apologies, and I take responsibility for bringing this late. I am going to ask for your consideration of a late flying item. I'm going to share my screen. This is showing as change order 3. It is actually change order 2. But it is for the night work premium associated with the sewer extension to support the town housing project. So we did meet with town, and as we expected, they said they were really, I'll paraphrase, only comfortable with this work taking place if it were to be night work. Given how congested Novadear Farm Road can be with 2 schools and as a main artery. The night work premium from the contractor came back at $120,000 plus the contractor's overhead and 5% fee for a total of $139,532.09. It's a not to exceed amount. We did send this really at the last minute to you right at 5 p.m. I can run through it here. I also have Ted Gentry available from CHA. He has reviewed this and gone over the numbers with the contractor. Again, I do recognize I'm bringing it to you late without your ability to look over the work. If it's something you'd like to send back to us to work on, I completely understand. But at this time, I would recommend approval based on the fact that we are a little bit behind on this project and we want to continue to move forward. So I'll leave that up for now. I can pull the share screen off also if you would like.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions or concerns with approving this?
No
I think
good.
it's the way it has to be done.
No comment.
Yes.
I'm just curious if we were able to look at these charges are similar to what's been going on around town, you know, with the night work that's been done everywhere, and do they fall in line with that? Do we have a sense of that? Just for
I don't know. I haven't done that comparison.
okay.
My concern is any further delay is going to end up costing us what might be a delta to this amount, and the delay is probably more costly than trying to argue or push back, excuse me, on the cost of this and then having to renegotiate and then come together and reapprove it. So how much is it? It is a big number for that, but so our potential exposure for causing delay, I think, to the project. So I would support this. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels.
I agree with what Arthur says.
As
Is
do
that a
I.
motion?
I'll make a motion we approve. I just was curious if we'd done that diligence, that's all.
Okay.
And I
Thanks.
understand the timeline didn't permit it, so I make the
Right.
motion to approve.
All right, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Hearing no further discussion, Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin.
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
the chair votes aye. Thank you. And then on the ones that weren't ready, Mr. Carberg, back to you just quickly on those.
Sure. Boyana, would you mind sharing your screen again, please? Or Billy?
Not all of the ones that are critical to this project, I'm sorry, to be specific. What's outstanding that we need to make sure that we don't have further delay, and if we need a special meeting, I think this is the time to quickly talk about that.
I believe, and please, Rich or Ted, jump in if I'm wrong. I believe with those, we will have addressed all known items that we need to address.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to verify that with the modified exhibit. It just wasn't clear to me if we had them all. Okay, so we're marching forward again. Thank
That
you.
we are.
All right, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. With that, take us to pending matters, Mr. Carberg, the South Apron ramp expansion project update.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the town and the airport, the select board and the airport commission have each executed their respective license agreements. Payment was submitted by Robert B. Hour to National Grid, and the easement is ready and lined up for the 2025 annual town meeting warrant for the South Ramp project transformer placements that will power the ramp lights and, I honestly think more importantly, the noise monitoring system. We have included the town agenda information summary in your packet since it was at another regulatory board and it was approved on October 2nd. The next step is for National Grid to schedule and perform the work. I do not have any dates for that. I will pass that along when I do. Otherwise, the updates for the ramp was still the ramp extension was still 1/3 full in use during the Nantucket project weekend. There was some heavy traffic associated with that. And then on Sunday, we received our second and final coat of paint on the markings. So that work is also concluded. Went very smoothly. We were able to coordinate it with air traffic without necessitating a shutdown. PFAS we have addressed. Skipping to the crew quarters project. Thank you for your approvals of this work. I will ad-lib that I will follow up, Mr. Marks, for your question on price appropriateness with other town projects. I'll also be doing my best to keep those costs down, as that was a not to exceed amount associated with contract. We are currently delayed in evaluating submittals, but we are going to catch up and get that going. But we will face a schedule delay that I'll have to bring to you. We're doing what we can to keep that to a minimal amount. And we're working through the preparation and approval of those submittals and those items to move that project forward. So the select board, again, they have just approved the noise waiver for the night construction work that was at the select board meeting last night. I'd like to thank Erica Mooney for running point on that with the airport, but on the town side. I believe we are now scheduling this work to begin on the 28th of October. Again, it will be night work. The airport will be in the traditional town role of putting forth the abutters notices, the project contact lists, the website and social media notices, handling questions and coordinating that entire process. For the terminal optimization project, as I mentioned before, I will soon receive the program definition report from McFarland Johnson. I'll be reviewing it then with our owner's project manager. And we will have a more comprehensive report out for the November meeting with details on design, budget, schedule, next steps. As part of that, we also are considering potential options for the geothermal system. And I think we've all heard the commissioners cuts across projects, but the commissioner's goals for sampling and evaluating the project. So that's loud and clear. Are there any questions on pending matters before I move on to finance?
Commissioners? Finance, please.
Okay, for the final 2026 fiscal year operating budget, we have that for you in your packet. There are no changes from the draft Maria and I presented previously. I will have the airport budget meeting with the town finance manager. I believe that will be on November 7th with the town manager and the finance department. That's the next step for review. Following that, I believe we do go in front of FinCom and then the select board for their adoption. So I am looking for a vote for the airport commission's approval of the budget. You can approve it or decide to wait or send it back to staff or for more work at your direction.
So why don't we start before we go to that with, are there any questions from commissioners regarding any of the items or notes? They're very detailed, what we had in the packet. I went through it and I appreciate that. Is there any outstanding individual items that anybody has any questions or concerns about? All right, hearing none. So with that, is there a motion to accept the or approve, excuse me, the budget as proposed?
Actually, I do have
Okay, yes, Mr. Buscarin, thank you.
It seems to me our 25 and 26 budgets are come vary greatly from the actual revenue and expenses. Our projected expenses are 3 or 4 million more than we've had in reality, and our revenues are $6 million less than as anticipated. I'm just wondering why our budget is so far off our actuals.
My belief is it's related to the retained earnings, but Mr. Carberg?
It's related to retained earnings and it's also related to performance. We've been very successful at going forward with projects for the commission's approval, and obtaining items under grant eligibility that may not have been initially thought to have been eligible. Credit the state DOT's ASMP program for that. We take those capital items forward, we pay off the projects, and then we also often receive those grant proceeds after the fact. Those become revenue. We take a conservative approach to fuel sales revenue. You know, we average the previous 3 years, both from a price and from a volume standpoint, and we aggressively manage our margins in the summer, continually more and more effective with that. But it's not a gamble we like to take forward in our revenue picture. We like to take that conservatively. All told, that ends up for certifying more retained earnings at the end of the budget season. And I wouldn't say we're managing to it on the margin, but I think we are fortunate that we have a revenue portfolio that can outgain, you know, what we budget for.
Thanks.
Did that do a good job at answering your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
So moved to accept the budgets.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for all your work on that. Mr. Carberg, Mr. Smith's tenant alteration application.
Okay, so thank you. So I've exchanged several emails with Mr. Malloy, who is Mr. Smith's permitting agent. At this time, Mr. Smith is looking for a positive endorsement from the commission that the tenant is in good standing with the airport for relocating the water line. That way the planning and land use department can remove the stop work order. To this point, I think the airport could direct correspondence, on their own or through staff to the planning board, that they find the relocation plans acceptable, and then discussions to finalize this work could take place between airport staff and the tenant. We've reviewed the plans for relocating the water line. As airport staff, we don't have any concerns that we don't think could be addressed through a work plan with the tenant. Mr. Willett, the water company director, is also acceptable with those relocation plans. That's an important consideration for us. And the items that I talked about for the finalization of a work plan, moving the water line that backs the SRE fire suppression system. Water lines are moved and fire watches are set all the time. We would just want to coordinate that item with the tenant, as well as work going on our property. But these are all sort of administrative steps that I think we can take on. So what I'm asking for the commission to consider is not necessarily at this time to approve the full tenant alteration application, but I think we can and possibly should, if the commission is comfortable, give direction that we find the water line relocation acceptable, so the planning board can take that information, lift the stop work order, and then we can all proceed positively towards the leasehold's primary purpose as impound and storage.
Thank you, Mr. Carberg. Have you or staff been to the site itself and you're comfortable with the state of affairs there?
I have not been there in the past week, so I can't in good faith speak to that.
Before that or any, I mean, you're comfortable with us moving forward with this though?
I'm comfortable moving forward. I've generally been by the site.
Okay, all right, I hear what you're saying. Anybody else? Questions? All right, is there a motion? So just for a technicality, Mr. Carberg, is formal action needed here, or this is just sort of, you know, an understanding of the commission that we're not taking any action in the negative, if you will?
Yeah, we believe we're on a good path with the tenant, and I think what I'm looking for is that you're comfortable with me working with Mr. Malloy and planning to take the steps to move the project forward.
Is there any concerns from any commissioners with the advancement of Mr. Smith's planning board application?
No.
All right, hearing none, I think you have your answer, Mr. Carberg.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Manager's report, please.
Okay, for our AIP and AIP-like projects, the master plan, McFarland Johnson is working on creating landside alternatives to present to the TAC group. The next TAC meeting is planned for early December, but I believe it's not yet scheduled with a calendar invite. So we would circulate that soon. For the geometry and DVE project, we have submitted our DVE plan. For ARF truck delivery, it is expected around winter break. We're working on resolving an initial acceptance and testing issue related to the foam proportioning system, as is the rest of the airport industry. I'll speak to that briefly. Many airports are working on transitioning to AFFF, as are the ARF manufacturers. It's still a recommendation by the equipment manufacturers that the airport sprays even the F3 foam to test the proportioning system and the connectivity readings. Airports such as Nantucket were not comfortable with that. We want to use the no foam cart solutions. So what airports are doing now in working with FAA certifications, they're developing a surrogate fluid, which is water with an inert binder that exists at the same viscosity as the new foam. So that's something that we can use to actually dispense a similar product and test sort of the capacity and performance of the truck in a ecologically neutral fashion. So we're continually looking at this, working with the FAA and working at airports who are undergoing the same work as we are. But just want the commission to know that even though it is fluorine-free foam, we are not anticipating on dispensing it to the ground. The runway 624 centerline design, we have received bids and we are reviewing that package. For continued environmental monitoring, that work is underway. For the PFAS mitigation grant, the select board has approved the borrowing authorization. I believe we have put our advertisement in the paper, and there's now a 10 to 15 day deadline that we are monitoring. South ramp, I previously updated on. I don't have an update on hangar development. For the fence relocation in the bunker area, we have located the new fence line. We will be scheduling utility service and begin work shortly. Currently, the materials are on order by the fencing contractor, and as soon as we have this lined up, we will bring the rent waiver with the tenant to you under the exhibit. This would be waiving the tenant's rent in proportion with the amount of effort that he has submitted to have the fencing work done. I do not remember the number. He submitted the number. We put it out for third-party review, and it's appropriate and acceptable. I'm going to say it's somewhere in the $12,000 to $18,000 range. Fence relocation for the South Shore. We're waiting on a price from the contractor. RFP bid status, as I mentioned previously, received one bid for the runway 624 centerline. I guess I have further updates on here. It's slightly above our authorization. We're working with town finance to accommodate this. It's a difference of around $300,000 on a $1.3 million project. So we're going to work to find a way forward. Bids are due, I believe, tomorrow for the refueling pad wall repair. So we will open those and see what we get in response to that. I have no update on the RFP to lease 33 bunker. We completed our work to, I'm sorry, that's an operations report, I think. And the request for expressions of interest for the flat top roof building, we are developing this request for expressions of interest. It's an aviation use. I believe I have the authority to extend it on a month-to-month basis to the existing tenant, which is Flyblade, if the tenant is willing. I wanted to bring that to the commission's attention. It's an aeronautical use. We have the right to negotiate exclusively. The tenant's operating in good standing. They could use the space. It would be revenue for the airport. So I intend to keep with them until we issue and manage a new bid package for that. But if there's anything Commissioner would like to see differently, please let me know. Any questions before I move into the operations update?
Is Flyblade using that? I mean,
They do.
actively using, I guess, because I know there's stuffs in there.
They are actively using it. It's not a very high flight volume. You know, I don't have privy to their exact schedule, but I may not, you know, I might expect 1 or 2 operations between now and Stroll, and then an additional couple winter Stroll. But that's sort of the order of magnitude I expect.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move on into the operations update. We completed our mold mitigation work in the air traffic control. I believe it was a server and utility room with a third-party contractor. I believe the work is complete. If it's not, I'll provide another update in the November meeting. You know, fall remains busy as it has for the shoulder season. 1/3 of the South Ramp extension was full for the Nantucket project. Jet A, we've reviewed our flight procedures, no update. Generally speaking, I am lumping this into a group of items to discuss over the next month as part of a strategy session for our future noise abatement efforts. It will also include items such as review of the ramp operational plan, and our APU log. Our hold room tents and our FBO tents, we're planning on having these taken down next week. JetBlue's schedule is paired now to 2 flights a week, and Tradewind's flights will be significantly less after this holiday weekend. Our annual audit takes place next week. The auditing firm is going to be on site in the conference room, so you may see 1 or 2 of their staff members here if you stop by. We had 2 bird strikes recently, and we held a review of the wildlife hazard management plan, as these are both triggering events on October 9th. This is a requirement under our wildlife hazard management plan. The first strike occurred on October 5th. The second was on October 7th. They both involved JetBlue aircraft operations, one of them, at least one of them being an engine ingestion. That aircraft was checked out by the mechanic and carried on without issue. But obviously, it's something we want to take seriously. We believe that seagulls, of which there are 3 species, are the culprit for those strikes. So we're following up with increased patrols, announced bird activity through the tower, but currently we have no changes planned to our management plan. Questions on operations before I move on to statistics?
Hearing none.
Okay, thank you. For statistics, total operations in August were down 13%. Year to date, they're down 3%. Southwest Ramp ops were up less than 1% for August. Enplanements were up 4.3% in August and up 7% on year to date. So again, it's the same trend of fewer aircraft carrying more people. Cape Air numbers for August were very good, while Boston was down 5%. New Bedford was up 29%. Hyannis was up 219%, so 526 in plane passengers, over 165 for August of last year. So it's the 5th consecutive month of growth in that market. And then the Vineyard was up 213%, admittedly on smaller numbers. For JetBlue, Boston market was up 13%, DC down 9%, White Plains up 60%, JFK down 1%, and LaGuardia down 34%. United, Newark was down 37%, and United enplaned 355 passengers to O'Hare, which they did not operate last year. Delta, summing across their 2 fleet aircraft types, they were down 52% in LaGuardia and up 8%. I'm sorry, down 52% in JFK and up 8% in LaGuardia. American was down 8% in Philadelphia, up 24% in Charlotte, up 8% in DC, up 142% in O'Hare. The LaGuardia enplaned 1,462 passengers, which they did not operate last year as part of their code share with JetBlue, which explains the JetBlue numbers being down. So for fuel, Jet A overall was up 4.6% year to date over the 3-year average. With our year to date with these stats, that's also the previous 3 months. So I won't review the previous 3 months, turning to fuel categories. And then for the month of September, we were down 10.6% over the 3-year average. FBO was up 10.7% over previous 3-year average fiscal year to date, 3.5% for September. Commercial sales then are where you see the decline, down 6% fiscal year to date and down 48% over the 3-month average. And that's due to just a decline of, which are not a decline of air carrier traffic in September, but JetBlue tends to fuel at their hubs in Boston and JFK. They are our predominant September operator this year, so we're not selling a lot of fuel to our terminal tenants. Low lead was up 8.1% on the fiscal year, up 14.5% for the month of September. And this is due predominantly to the strength of Cape Air. We've had some conversations with their staff. Once Delta and the other larger air carriers stopped service, Cape Air really picked up a lot of that slack on the weekends. I credit a lot of that to the Boston Logan Terminal B2C connector. You can connect from Terminal C to Terminal B on Delta without rescreening. And I think the Boston Cape Air service is seeing a lot of code share and interline activity because of that. Brig was down 13% in August and is down 20% on the year to date. And that's consistently down across all carriers. We had 17 noise calls in August, 11 were from one resident. The APU log summary, I don't have it in your packet. I apologize, so I will read it for you. So in September, operations logged 9 PU entries down from the previous month. These were all initial warnings to the pilot in command. Following that warning, 8 of the pilots complied with the APU limitations or provided a valid reason for running. Airport operations then issued 0 second warnings to pilots. For the personnel report, Channing Lefebvre joined our custodial team. You're likely going to recognize Channing from his previous role at the airport with TSA. This is Boyana's last day, and this airport commission meeting is her last official duty. So please join me in wishing her well in her next career and thanking her for her service.
Thank you very, very much. It's been great working with you. We certainly appreciate all of your efforts.
Likewise, thank you so much for all the opportunities and help and support. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll miss you.
And then Deb Crooks, our current finance assistant, previously FBO and several other roles. She will be leaving the island, though we will still have her. She will be working remotely for Nantucket. We're going to formalize that in a remote work agreement. So she still will be on board with us. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Commissioners, any comments on the report?
No,
I just had one, or maybe we could have that APU log in the next report. Did you say there was 9 entries or 90
909.
in August?
In September.
September.
Cameron, I do have you on, correct? This might be my mistake. I may not have included the August report, and then I asked Cameron for September numbers, which would be a deviation from what you were probably expecting.
I have both the August and the September reports. I will send them over and we can include them in the next commission meeting as well.
Okay, I mean, and maybe we could have how many operations, or I guess we have that further back in the statistics. So there was 9 logged out of how many jet operations on the GA side?
I don't believe we have the jet operations called out. We have total operations.
All right, so how many total ops?
I'd have to go back and pull out the jet aircraft separately from our software.
What about just total ops on for the, don't we have that as a statistic for the south ramp on the GA? Just all ops, both jet and propeller?
Yeah, that would be all ops on the southwest ramp.
What number is that, just for out of curiosity?
Sure, one moment, please.
It's in the thousands, right?
Beg your pardon, I'm almost there.
No, I don't mean to put you on the
I
spot.
think
I'm trying
it's- August looks like 6,400. September looks like 38.
yeah,
I'm reading this right.
right. That's kind of where I was trying to find in there too.
Yeah.
So,
3,800 ops, and you only had 9.
and we had 9. So I know we're working on some software to hopefully do that, but I mean, 9
Yeah, it's not bad.
seems a little bit that low to me. I just hope there could be some effort towards, and in the quieter off season now, that the staff has really taken notice. It's, to the extended run, if there are extended run times, and hopefully those logs would be increased in this season, even though there's less operations, because there's less pressure on the staff, I would think, and they're able to take notice of those. I hope so. I just wanted to point that out. It seems for that period of time, in comparison to that amount of operations, that I hope we could work on that. Anybody else, anything on the manager's report? Commissioners' comments. We have the meeting calendar for next year. Any concerns? Conflicts known at this point?
No.
Okay.
No comment. Cameron had her hand up there.
Yes, Ms. Woods.
I was just going to add some color to that, in that I've been following the APU use significantly more than I had in past few months, as this new software that we've demoed, that you saw it as well, Mr. Chair, has come to light. And I've been unbelievably impressed with the amount of communication regarding the APU that's been ongoing with pilots, specifically from operations and the FBO. There are 3 points now between them landing and them shutting engines off that they are informed of APU restrictions. And they've been asking more for GPU than I've ever seen before. We don't currently have a GPU log, though it's something that I think might be worthwhile to look into. But our GPUs have been in constant rotation, as these pilots have been leaning more on those than using their own APU use. So while the number might appear low, it really is probably closer to being accurate than you might think, because they've just been doing such a phenomenal job. And I've been watching like a sort of like a creep from my office of how many aircraft are on the runway, so on top of it, so ready to pounce, and they've been doing a great job. So
That's
I would just
really
like-
helpful and encouraging. Thank you. Your efforts are absolutely appreciated.
I'm
Thank you.
sure operations might have a different take on it, as I'm monitoring them and on the radio all the time, but
Well, in fairness, that's what it takes, I think, for the balance that has to happen. As you know, I think, made commitments related to that ramp expansion that we were going to do better, that, you know, considering the rapid growth over the last decade of the corporate, aviation on that side. So, the emissions, really, as we're all trying to be, I think, conscientious of the, of really Nantucket, the environment, but Nantucket specific. I think I think there's being good stewards there is part of running the airport, and at the same time, being there and for the operators to use the facility and, striking that balance. So thank you very much. I appreciate that additional color.
thank you.
Commissioners' comments, any comments for any items not on the agenda or for future agenda items? I just wanted to briefly give an update on the manager search. As you saw though the contract was again formally executed tonight, under the authorization from the last meeting, we've been, working with ADK. Staff has been extremely helpful in pulling together documents. So there's I think a pretty good job description together, some photos, and we have a meeting tomorrow with them as well, strategy session to continue to put forth, getting this actual position advertised and live. They gave me a draft timeline a few days ago, and so following hopefully tomorrow's session, I will provide that to to staff to distribute that to you, and hopefully that gets us a little more fine-tuned and understanding of sort of when that position is going to be live and what the remainder of that process hopefully looks like. So stay tuned. We're working on it. Anything else? Any other public comment for any items not on the agenda? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session per general law, chapter 30A, section 21A, to review the minutes enumerated on the agenda. For clause 3, discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Walsh, and clause 3, discuss strategy with respect to pursuing claims against manufacturer of PFAS and other potential sources of PFAS. Both items where the chair has determined an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission, not to return to open session. Is there such a motion?
So move.
And is there a second?
Again,
Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Biscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.